Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. Thanks to Rich McFadden and Chad Benson for filling my seat last week. And, Jim, let's start right up with our good martini. This is courtesy of NPR. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the White House is ready to enforce sanctions against Iran that will be reimposed starting Monday, an effort by the U.S. to push back against Tehran's malign activity. The renewed sanctions follow President Trump's decision in May to withdraw the U.S. from the multi-nation nuclear accord with Tehran. The 2015 agreement brought a suspension of U.S. sanctions in exchange for Tehran's agreement to end its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Right now, effective today, trade sanctions resume on the import of Iranian products such as carpets and pistachios. Licenses that allow Tehran to buy U.S. and European aircraft also are revoked. And just ahead of the reimposed sanctions, Iran acquired 5 new European commercial planes, according to the Associated Press. Sanctions on Iran's oil industry and central bank are set to be restored on November 4th. Sales of Iranian oil are a key source of hard currency for the country. So, Jim, we already know that the Iranian economy is in shambles. I suppose they now can blame their woes on the fact that we're getting tough on them economically again. But the fact is that there's plenty of evidence Iran was cheating all along, not to mention the fact that this deal was terrible from the start and had very little verification and ability to inspect wherever we wanted to. So, as we said back in May, the president did the right thing here, and he's doing the right thing again.
Indeed, Greg. Actually, you look back, the Obama administration executed about half of the strategy correctly. The sanctions that were put in place, both going back to the Bush administration and, say, the first half or so of the Obama administration, really did put the squeeze on the Iranian mullahs. They really did make it difficult for that country to thrive, made them effectively, economic pariahs. And just when it was enough to bring them to the negotiating table. But instead of saying, okay, now you guys are going to have to choose between a prosperous economy and a nuclear program and choose wisely, the Obama administration basically took all these promises. Well, you're going to delay it for 11 years. You're going to not do anything for 11 years. And we'll give you everything we'll basically rescind everything. We'll let you guys do everything you want. We have no restrictions on your other, missile development, no restrictions on your sponsorship of terrorism, no restrictions on the rest of your behavior. We just want you to not develop nuclear weapons for 11 years. And then it effectively hoped for the best in that 11-year period. And I think most of us looked at that and said, look, that's just not as good a deal. But what's even worse is that you had the tool to make them say uncle, so to speak. You had those sanctions. Why were you so eager to let up the pressure when you could have gotten a deal that really addressed American national security interests and the region's security interests, instead of just settling for the first deal you could get on the table? The Iranian economy is already having serious problems because of the announcement that these were going to go into effect. The administration gave banks and companies 90 days to kind of unwind any of their financial entanglements with Iranian companies and the Iranian regime. And there are more sanctions to come. So I guess the best case scenario is that this could bring them back in that situation. We've already seen protests against the Iranian regime, and ironically, more against them for the economic problems they're having than for the general oppressiveness of the regime. I guess you could say over the course of a generation, they've gotten used to that. But, basically, if people aren't getting fed, if people feel like they can't prosper, they can't make a living, that's when they really take to the streets and get angry at the mullahs. So we may be in a situation where we have leverage again, and maybe we can reach a point where they, given a choice between economic stagnation and ruination versus having a nuclear program, maybe we can get them to give up the nuclear program, or at least let them realize that continuing to have a nuclear program is going to cost them dearly for many years to come.
No, that's absolutely right. And we salute the people in the streets in Iran. They're taking their safety into their own hands. We know that those can be repressed quite brutally. But these people know that with all these billions upon billions of dollars of Iranian assets that were released as part of the nuclear agreement, that the government, the mullahs, the Iranian guard, they squirreled all that money away. It didn't go to help the people at all, and that's why inflation is terrible, wages are awful, jobs are not in a good situation there either. So Iran is in a bad state, and let's hope this makes that regime even more vulnerable.
Terrorist strikes again in London.
Putin's nuclear ambitions are raising proliferation questions.
There's a new military strategy in the South China Sea.
Global events happening now mean the demand for national security professionals will spike over the next decade. America's security will depend on individuals highly trained in strategy, disruption management, and decision-making. The Daniel Morgan Graduate School of National Security prepares students for a world full of instability. Students in our state-of-the-art school, just 3 blocks from the White House, take courses in counterterrorism, U.S. nuclear weapons, Russian politics, and statecraft. Our graduates are well prepared for sought-after security positions in government and private sectors. Even more unique are the multi-full-ride scholarships provided by donors investing in future leaders. For more information, go to dmgs.org/radio. For a career in organizations like Marriott and Boeing, the CIA, or FBI, and a possible full-ride scholarship, go immediately to dmgs.org/radio. That's dmgs.org/radio.
All right, Jim, time for the bad martini now, and I'm going to call this the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez effect of 2020, that if you're running for a prominent position in the Democratic Party, you have to go as hard and as far left as you possibly can. And Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren running for re-election this year. She's also saying she's reassessing now her 2020 presidential ambitions. She had said previously that she wasn't going to do it, but darn it, Jim, Donald Trump's president, and she didn't know that last year for some reason, and now she is reconsidering 2020. But as you point out in the Morning Jolt today, she's raising some eyebrows due to a speech she gave at Dillard University in New Orleans this past weekend, where she said, quote, "Let's just start with the hard truth about our criminal justice system. It's racist. It is. And when I say our system, I mean all the way. I mean front to back. This is not just sentencing reform we're talking about here. We're talking about the front end on what you declare to be illegal, on how you enforce it, on who gets arrested." And this is one of the big reasons why we can't actually get criminal justice reform done that's in a good way, because while there are some things all sides agree on, it's this all-or-nothing approach that the Democrats want here. So, Jim, you've had some interesting thoughts in the Jolt today on why Elizabeth Warren is going hard left on our justice system is racist, and it always has been.
Yeah, look, this is probably the least productive, least useful rhetoric if you really want to change policies and you actually want to change things within the criminal justice system. In fact, most criminal justice reform advocates are very quick to advocate, to insist they do not want to see criminals go unpunished, and they do not want to see criminals receive less punishment than the law deems appropriate. And obviously, different folks will define it different ways, but they're very quick to emphasize their aim is not soft on crime. Their attitude is very much, particularly prison reform advocates say, look, the aim is not if you do the crime, you don't have to do the time. They very much want to say, okay, once you've done the time, you must serve your sentence. The question then is, what do we do to help ensure you don't become recidivist, that you don't end up behind bars again? Do we set up a system where you can get your GED if you dropped out? Do we set up a system where you can learn a skill? Do we give you mentors? Do we give you drug treatment if you have a drug addiction problem? All these different things to try to help you become a productive member of society once you get out, so that you don't end up behind bars. And in fact, it's been kind of fascinating to watch how much the criminal justice reform advocates push for things, and they make non-traditional arguments. One of their arguments is fiscal conservatism, about how this saves taxpayers if people don't make multiple trips to prison over the course of their lives. They make a dumb decision in their younger days. They hopefully learn from it and go on to become productive citizens, taxpayers, et cetera, et cetera. When you make this kind of a sweeping indictment, when you say, the criminal justice system is racist all the way front to back, I mean, I don't think she's really thought through the ramifications of that argument, Greg, because it basically would say that almost every indictment and almost every conviction under this criminal justice system is unjust, at the very least the ones of African Americans, but certainly argue of any minority group. To really achieve justice, I suppose she thinks we'd have to just let everybody out and start over, because she's basically indicted the whole thing. And I kind of said, look, this, the Jolt I lay out, look, this is after 8 years of an African American president, 2 African American attorney generals, the sheer number of African American and minority group federal judges, prosecutors, law enforcement. I mean, are they all just cogs in a racist system? And then I asked that question, Greg, and I came to a realization. If you're Elizabeth Warren and you want to be president of the United States starting in 2021, your first obstacle are the other Democrats. And the other Democrats have probably come to mind that probably are going to be one of your biggest obstacles, Greg. Safe to assume, probably former Attorney General Eric Holder, former Assistant Attorney General Deval Patrick, also governor of Massachusetts, and former California Attorney General Kamala Harris, who are all African American, who probably will have a decent chunk of the African American vote if they choose to run. But if you're Elizabeth Warren and you say the entire criminal justice system is racist all the way front to back, well, then isn't that kind of a way of saying Holder, Patrick, and Harris can't be trusted, that they were part of this corrupt system? So anyway, it struck me as a subtle way of jabbing at these at the rivals without directly jabbing at them. Having said that, I think it's pretty obvious. This is very destructive rhetoric. This is the sort of thing that causes people to lose all faith in the system. It indicts a lot of people who just get up every day and do the very best they can. Are there problems in the system? Absolutely. It's interesting that she says this isn't just sentencing disparity. I think that's one of the areas you would get a fairly broad bipartisan consensus to address. If you want to say that, there are plenty of folks who are not African American who are deeply concerned about the way African Americans are treated by cops and the idea that different traffic stops get treated differently depending upon the color of your skin. We could have a productive conversation about this, but we're not going to, as long as the likes of Senator Elizabeth Warren are running around saying the entire system is racist all the way front to back.
Well, Jim, her people have been deeply oppressed for a number of centuries now, so I think that's where this finds its roots, right?
Come on. When's the last time Elizabeth Warren spoke dishonestly about a racial matter just to get ahead, right? And that's just not the kind of person she is.
Have you seen this independent Senate candidate in Massachusetts? He's from India. He's a doctor, and he has this fake Indian hashtag campaign going against Elizabeth Warren.
Inevitable, I suppose.
Yes, exactly. Unfortunately, it won't likely make a difference. But Elizabeth Warren playing exactly to type here. All right, Jim, time for the Crazy Martini. And in the way our news cycle works now, it feels like this happened about 2 weeks ago. But Friday night on CNN, there was an interview between Don Lemon and LeBron James. The main focus of the interview was the new school that LeBron James is sponsoring in Akron, Ohio, the I Promise School. They talked a lot about that, and part of the conversation dealt with, what's your idea about the balance between academics and athletics? And James was talking about how he believes sports brings people together. And as part of that, yes, he mentioned the president.
When you're a part of sports and you're a part of your mind, it just brings so much camaraderie and so much fun. We are in a position right now in America, more importantly, where this race thing is taking over, because I believe our president is kind of trying to divide us. But I think
kind of.
Yeah, he is. He is. Not, I don't want to say kind of. He's dividing us, and what I noticed over the last few months, that he's kind of used sport to kind of divide us, and that's something that I can't relate to, because I know that sport was the first time I ever was around someone white, and I got an opportunity to see them and learn about them, and they got an opportunity to learn about me, and we became very good friends. And I was like, oh, wow, this is all because of sports. And sports has never been something that divides people. It's always been something that brings someone together.
So, Jim, LeBron was going to make a fairly brief statement there, and then Don Lemon kind of poked at it and got a longer response. That, of course, leads to Trump a little before midnight on Friday tweeting out, LeBron James was just interviewed by the dumbest man on television, Don Lemon. He made LeBron look smart, which isn't easy to do. I like Mike. Then the next morning, Don Lemon, who's the real dummy? A man who puts kids in classrooms or one who puts kids in cages? Then you've got a lot of people thinking that what Trump said was based in racism. Max Boot saying, I'm sure it's a coincidence that Trump thinks African Americans are dumb. Dan Rather called it racist. And then just to add to the absurdity, John Kasich chimes in. The first part's fine. He says, rather than criticizing King James, we should be celebrating him for his charity work and efforts to help kids. And then he goes on to say, by the way, he's better than Michael Jordan. That's a fact, which, of course, is not true and undermines anything else John Kasich would have to say. Apologies to David French, but not really. Jim, and then all of this, Trump tweets this out, slamming one of the most beloved people in Ohio right before he goes to pinch hit for the Republican running in the special House election in Ohio. So kind of absurdity all around here, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would say extraordinarily deeply frustrating is another way of putting it, because you forgot in there, Greg, that Michael Jordan's attitude was like, hey, don't bring me into this. Whoa, Mr. President, don't. No. Actually, I don't want to be defended if that's the context. Let's kind of point out that the I Promise School, right? Eventually the plan is it's going to serve 1st through 8th grades, is exclusively for students who are academically behind, right? The folks who need it the most. People argue about whether it counts as a charter school because it's part of the Akron public school system. Let's just say that it's chartery for those of us who are fans of charter schools. Longer school days and a longer school year, right? STEM curriculum. You can find that in a lot of schools these days, but it's good to see that emphasized. And probably these are students who might not otherwise get the opportunity to have that kind of curriculum. But it's also very much emphasizing building a support network for the kids when they're not in school. There's a food pantry for families, GED and job search report for the parents. And for every student who graduates high school, free college tuition to the University of Akron, right? Free bicycles for the kids to get back and forth to school. Chromebooks, laptops for the kids. The teachers are trained in emotional and psychological services for at-risk children, right? I mean, this is exactly what we want to see. And we all should be saying, attaboy, LeBron James. That is a fantastic job. This is exactly what we want to see in our celebrities, and you are making Akron a better place. Instead, it's got to be all about the president. And now it's the argument. And the interesting thing is how he brings in is Michael or LeBron better? As if that has anything to do with it. Now, if the LeBron James says things that President Trump doesn't like, fine. You, Mr. President, you can't jump. Okay, I guess you can jump onto Twitter and denounce every professional athlete who doesn't like you. But you shouldn't be surprised by this. This is part of the job. And instead of saying, what this demonstrates is that President Trump will attack anyone who criticizes him, regardless of context, regardless of other things the speaker has done. And, for those of us who actually care about policy, who actually care about education, who actually care about how, this all turns into a distraction. This all turns into, there was a great opportunity to advance the cause of good education. And as much as the Cleveland Public Schools, or the Ohio Teachers Union is saying, yay, it's not a charter. Let's face it, it's pretty darn chartery. It's very free of all the traditional restrictions and rules that are put on a public school system. And, charter schools have been this remarkable advance in education, succeeded in a whole lot of places. And instead of having that conversation, we're having the conversation of, does President Trump only call black people stupid? The short answer is no. He calls all kinds of people stupid. Now, here's the thing. President Trump lashes out in anger that anybody who criticizes him and denounces them as being dummies and stuff like that. I mean, when he does it against Chuck Todd, does that mean that he's not racist? Well, I think it means that he basically just, is quick to anger and quick to lash out at anyone who criticizes him or irks him in any way. This is not ideal for the country, but this is Trumpism. And so it's one of those things where it would be nice if the media would say, hey, you know what, instead of, covering the Trump versus LeBron versus Don Lemon, how dare he insult the intelligence of Don Lemon, approach to this, we could do more discussion of what LeBron School is doing, but apparently that doesn't interest the media nearly as much, Greg.
That's hard to get into even 280 characters, Jim. It's much easier to just throw out a sentence with a bunch of exclamation points. So
there you go. Each one of those takes up a character.
That's right. It's sad, but it's where we are. Jim, good to be with you as always. Talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg. Jim
Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And be sure to tune in again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.